All right, welcome back, everybody. Today's topic, we are going to look at project-based learning. I don't want to make the assumption that everybody knows what it is. I'm sure most of you know what it is, but just kind of go through how we can incorporate it in our science classroom. So really quickly, just to touch on problem-based learning, or sometimes known as project-based learning. In other words, you're pretty much solving a problem. It's real world. It's a real world problem. It's not something that's made up and pulled from the clouds. It allows the students to act and think like a scientist and or an engineer, depending on what you have going on, because this is a very STEM-driven strategy. And it leaves the flexibilities for students to come with multiple solutions, and it's not something that can just be done in one day or week. It's done over a period of time. So this is one of those I highly recommend. Do not rush, and you'll hear me say that a lot throughout this session. So when can you use PBL? A great time that I like to use PBL is after testing, depending on when you test. I know everybody's windows are different, but for me, I usually have about, I'd say another 4 weeks or so, 3 to 4 weeks after testing where I have some free time. And that's typically where I like to use PBL. However, sometimes I don't always wait that late to use it. Sometimes I will go ahead and plan it out with my PLC, and we'll try to stretch it across an entire unit, depending on the unit. With 8th grade science, we have a total of 5 standards, and each standard is broken down with a ton of standard elements. So we try to pick one of the shorter units, usually one that maybe has 3 or 4 elements to it. We could do something like matter or waves, but as you know, those are the longer units that we follow throughout the school year. Okay, so something to think about with PBL is, we talk about how science is hands-on, and some people say, hey, look for inquiry-based strategies and things like that. PBL ties both of those in. The students are getting to do the hands-on part and different pieces of it, and they're also getting the opportunity to ask questions, collect data, do research, talk to different people within the community as a part of their research, and I'm going to talk about that as well. So overall, you're taking that to solve your problem, which is the great thing about it. I think some people think that hands-on is different from inquiry, which is different from problem-based or project-based, but they all tie in together, believe it or not. Okay, so if you were to put a PBL lesson, unit, topic together, these are the different components that you want to really hit on. The main thing is you want to make sure you have your topic, your theme, scenario, your problem or your question. Some people call it problem question, but you're given your problem and it's tied into your question, roles, and then your culminating activity. So I'm going to talk about each different portion of PBL and how you would tie it in, and I'll give you some examples as well, and I'll kind of show you how I've tied in. I call it semi-PBL. Some of it was full-on PBL, some of it was like partial PBL. So just to kind of give you an idea. All right, so your topic, that's the very broad part. Typically, that's just your content area. So, for example, with physical science, it could be energy, waves, motion, pretty much one of the 5 units. Again, the energy and motion are the shorter units. Waves is one of the longer units, but it's a great unit that you can apply PBL in there as well, because there's so many real world connections just tied in that one topic in that one unit. So again, remember your topic is very broad, but you're saying, okay, this is what I'm overall going to focus on. the theme. So we know when we read a book, your theme, it's almost like it's a quote or something like that that's overall overhanging. So your theme is a little more specific. The best way I would explain it is you're kind of taking part of your standard, the main part that they want you to know in your standard, or even your learning target. If you use learning targets in your school or with your PLC. So how I broke them down, my examples are the effects of heat transfer on the molecular motion, or illustrate practical applications of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, I mentioned that you could use your learning target. So here, this is definitely not a full-on learning target, but it's part of it. You know, if you were doing a learning target, it would be student will be able to X, Y, Z. So this is pretty much what the expected outcome is supposed to be, is what the theme is. This is specifically what you were looking at in PBL, or what you will accomplish. All right, your scenario. You are, with PBL, you are setting the stage. You could say it's like you're building the house. So you have to have a strong foundation. You've got your topic, you've got your theme, you're working your way up. So now you could say you're putting the walls up. So with your scenario, again, PBL in general is real world. So just reiterating, it's real world. You are giving the students this is where you're giving them the background information. You're giving them the information that they need to know up front. This does not include any research or anything like that, because that's what you're allowing the students to do. So, and this just kind of on when you decide to implement a PBL lesson. You may decide that you want to do it earlier in the year as a part and work it in as a unit. So you may not necessarily give all the content information to the students right away. That might be something that may be included as a part of their research. Or if you're doing it closer to the end, or maybe after as a summative activity where you've covered all the content, now you want to see how they apply it. So here's an example that I've used before. Pretty much the topic, and the topic was energy, and specifically talking about heat transfer. So you and a friend have just been dropped off in the wilderness with nothing but junk. And you find yourself in the woods in the morning. You're trying to figure out how you're going to cook food. So I was given this scenario to kind of lead my students to eventually, and you'll see this in a moment, the outcome is that they were going to have to design a cooking device. So this scenario is just kind of setting them up. Now, I did not mention heat transfer in here, and that honestly is up to you. You can make it a little more detailed with 8th graders, and you know your students better than anybody. I probably would go ahead and add more detail, but it depends on where they are. If you feel like they can handle not having as much detail, then you can kind of scale back on some of it as well. But again, okay, so the problem or the question that you're going to pose, as I already mentioned, what I was posing to the students was how can they create a cooking device that models or demonstrates heat transfer. So my question, I put it on the board. The way my board is set up, I pretty much put it with my phenomena as well, because I'm still using and referring back to my phenomena, even though I am doing a PBL lesson or unit. But again, my standard and my phenomena is what drives my instruction. The students always refer back to that, because the way they view a phenomena is, how can I answer this phenomena, or how would I answer that question? So the question that they have been given for this problem, or the problem that they have been given, is how can a cooking device be created that will heat up and or maintain heat? Now, you could probably go back and add additional questions. So since eventually they're going to have to show and demonstrate where heat transfer plays a role in this, you could add in some additional questions about that as well. So it's just, and it from there, it kind of gives them free reign. Okay, this is what we're referring back to. And they kind of go ahead and start thinking right off the top of their head. With this, it was great because I had some students that were campers. I had some, they weren't necessarily campers, but they were, I like to call them tinkers. They like to figure stuff out, take stuff apart, put it together, use what they have to create stuff. So this worked out very well for them. Roles. So anytime I do any activity in general, not just lesson, but even if it's like a small mini lab or a small lab activity, I always assign roles. So there's some different ways that you can go about doing roles with the PBL. But first thing, everybody should have something to do at all times. It's enough work for everybody to share the load. It does not have to be based on what ability a student has or what they can and can't do. They can do something. And there are two ways you could go about doing this. Some may go about assigning original roles. And what I mean by that is typically when I do a general activity, one person is a recorder, one person is a facilitator, one person's a group manager, one person's a supply person, that type of thing. It just kind of depends on where you're going with that. So you could still do that. However, with PBL being real world, I try to encourage people to create roles or jobs that are related to the topic. So for example, if I'm following the topic of heat transfer and we're talking about camping or being stranded out somewhere, it might be that a storm happened and they were stranded somewhere. You might assign somebody as like a Coast Guard member. You could assign a ranger, a wilderness ranger, that sort of thing. And that could actually be included as part of their research as well. But again, this is not something that can just be thrown together overnight. It's going to take a lot of planning on the teacher's end as well. So you would have all these different roles planned out already. I'm just throwing some stuff out there off the top of my head. All right, so this is the actual activity. So at that point, this may include where the students are collecting their research, their data, getting everything together, planning out what they're going to do. And this, again, it takes time. You need time. So this may happen over the course of days, weeks. At the most, I think the longest for me has been a month, but definitely days or weeks. Some people go longer. Some people might extend a PBL throughout an entire school year, especially if they're a STEM-based school. So these are just some different things that I could have done with that one topic, that one theme. My students had the option of 1 year creating a solar oven with certain materials. 1 year I just said, you know what, just create a cooking device of your choice. And that's what they did. And then another year to make it specific, and you'll see why I made it this specific, they had the option of creating a model solar home. So there, in another year, I just said, pick which one you decide you want to do and go from there. So to kind of jump back with the roles, even with the solar home, they had the role, they decided to pick a role of a realtor, an engineer, of course, a scientist that specialized in solar energy and things like that. So this is the most time-consuming part of your PBL. So I mentioned roles, and this is something that is common with science in general, not just PBL, but year-round. Collaboration. Some people don't like to collaborate, but with science, collaboration is a major component. You know, at the end of the day, some people say, well, when they take the test, when they take the milestones, they're not collaborating. But it's just like they say, two heads are better than one. It allows the students to discuss with each other, bounce ideas off of each other, get different perspectives. And there are so many benefits to collaboration. So PBL does require collaboration. Again, you might have some students that aren't really feeling it. Don't fight them on it. Don't force it on them. But with this, they quickly see, okay, in order to do this, I have to collaborate. In the past, I've had some students that were like this, but once they saw, okay, in order for me to accomplish this, I need to collaborate. And it was fine from there. But it was not a big argument. I didn't make it a big deal. I just said, okay, so why don't you try doing this first and see where you go, see where you end up. And of course, like I said, they came to the realization, okay, I have to collaborate. Another thing where I'm saying reiterate the importance of roles. Reason being, you know, when you're in groups, sometimes you have some people, they're going to do more than the other. And while that's natural, you kind of, as a teacher, want to facilitate throughout the classroom, making sure everybody is participating, engaging, and doing their part with PBL. You don't want to walk around and see that, okay, this person is doing this role plus this role, or they're doing the research plus this. Everybody has a fair share. They're working together. And I would encourage them as well. I would kind of give my 2 cents in. I wouldn't say you have to model it, but you might have to give them a little push. You might have to say, maybe pose a question to kind of get them going, to kind of get them to realize, okay, we need to make sure we're collaborating or make sure we're doing this and that. But that is your role as the teacher or facilitator. Another great thing with PBL is working with community partners or stakeholders on this. Again, we know PBL is real world, and you're giving the students a real problem. So what better way as a part of this, because it takes time, is to work with some community partners to get them to see, okay, this is what our job entails on a daily basis. This is what we do. This is how what we do ties into what you're talking about. And this is how we can help you. So a lot of times what you come to find is you've almost set up a whole STEM activity with PBL. All right, so like I mentioned, I mostly use the example of energy and heat transfer. So when I did my PBL lesson and I talked about the solar ovens and the solar homes, I did not have a picture of the solar home, but I did have a picture of the solar ovens. And what happened with that is there's this program in Georgia called Sun Power for Schools. And this is through the EMCs, pretty much the power companies. I know some places in Georgia are Georgia Power, some of them are EMCs. My area particularly is Flint EMC. So the way they set up this, and this was installed before I even started teaching. One of the teachers in our department signed up for a grant and was awarded that grant. So with that grant, we had a solar panel installed in the school. So with that project, we incorporated the use of the solar panel, checking the levels of the solar panel, logging in each day. And then we set up one day for some of the electricians and some of the other people that work at the EMC to come in and talk to our students. And it wasn't just my class. I do a lot of collaboration with my PLC. And I try to refer back to that a lot, because if it wasn't for them, there's no telling, I would be all over the place. So we do a lot of collaboration together. We worked it out where they came in and we did some stuff together as whole classes, and we did some things together as individual classes versus whole classes. So these people came in, they talked to the kids, they talked to them about energy, and we had the students go ahead and kind of, as a part of their research, go ahead and have them create their own questions that they would ask when our community partners came in. So that way they're not really wasting time. They did decide to come back another day while the students were working, just because they wanted to see where the students went with it. So it worked out great. The students enjoyed it, and these are just some final products one year when we just did the solar ovens, and they worked amazing. We checked, we checked the levels, but the students also kept in mind, and they figured out as a part of their research, okay, well, we cannot always depend on the sun levels. So we need to make sure that how we design our solar oven is compatible and it's not limited to the amount of sunlight that's outside. Another year, we decided not to do anything solar with energy, but we decided to focus on motion and force and take it a little bit further. So these two units are shorter units, but we have a museum here in our area called the Museum of Aviation. So if you have any museums in your area that would like to possibly come in and work with you, I would highly encourage you to at least ask or reach out. The Museum of Aviation they had their own STEM department, and our school was awarded a NASA grant. So what they did is they came in with the students. They worked and they came in throughout the entire school year, from typically about once a week, depending on what we had going on. And so this was not your typical, okay, we're currently working in this unit, this is what we're strictly working on. It was more of, okay, this is our topic, this is our theme, this is the scenario that we're giving you, and we're working on this throughout the entire school year. And we worked on it pretty much on a weekly basis, usually 1 to 2 days out the week. But the goal overall, the problem or the challenge that they were posed with was trying to create a model airplane using shoe boxes, and then of course other supplies that they were given. And so the students had to do their research and make sure they knew about thrust and drag and all these different things. And it worked great because some of the students had taken technology where they had talked about some of this as well. So they got to incorporate some of their outside research in this. And it was a great thing. They would record all their information in their STEM notebooks, because that was another thing that the museum was working with the students as well, was showing them how throughout the year, showing them how to properly document and record their observations in their STEM notebook and referring back to those notes as they were planning. Okay, now this last one was one that it was a work in progress, but of course due to COVID, it didn't fully fall through, but we had to put it on hold. So this is my actual, I have 2 Yorkies, but this is my actual vet that I use, Dr. Hodges, and the other one is Dr. Ferguson here. Well, in the last year and a half or so, they actually were picked up by National Geographic for their own TV show, if you're familiar with it. But at the time, prior to them getting picked up to the show, I was taking one of my Yorkies in for therapy with Dr. Hodges, and conveniently we were talking about the electromagnetic spectrum at the time. So we had planned this thing where the students, where I gave the scenario or the example earlier where the students had to create a device that demonstrated the electromagnetic spectrum. We were trying to set it up to where either he could come in and show them doing infrared therapy on one of my dogs, or maybe I go in on the weekend when I was taking my dog and we recorded it, or even do a Zoom call. So again, this is one of those, between virtual and in-person, where there's a will, there's a way. So we had it set to where if he couldn't come in due to his schedule, he could just Zoom in, or I could go ahead and have it pre-recorded. But due to COVID and some other things, we were unable to make that happen this school year. But again, this is just something to kind of keep in mind with collaboration and showing the students, okay, this is how we use science within the community. Okay. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out. When I trained on problem-based learning or project-based learning, the main training came from Virginia Initiative for Science Teaching and Achievement. So that is their website if you would like to check out some other sources from there. Another one, if you were interested, these are just also some other sources that can be used as well. I'm not saying you have to go out and apply for grants or things like that, but these two resources have tons of online resources and activities and ideas that can be used as well. So don't think, okay, I have to go out and sign up for this grant or that grant or anything like that. I'm just saying if you need an additional resource, you can go to their websites and check them out. All right, that is all I have for you. Until next time, I hope everything was useful. Again, please feel free to reach out and ask any questions.